We are standing here along the banks of Lost Creek. Lost Creek is a stream that runs through the campus of Rose-Hulman, as well as into Terre Haute. And Lost Creek drains a bigger watershed area. So that watershed area is all the land area where all the surface runoff drains to a particular point. So there's a particular land area that all of the surface runoff or water that runs along the surface will drain into Lost Creek. And so one of the concerns with that is looking at non-point source pollution. And so non-point source pollution would be all the different forms of pollution that kind of just gather on the surface of our land. So it could be oils and greases from parking lots, from cars, fertilizers, pesticides, things that are applied to lawn, bare soil, so sediment that bare soil. So all of those things, when it rains, the water picks it up and it's carried to the receiving water body. And so one of the benefits that we have from a mitigation project that was done on Lost Creek is all of the added vegetation that you can see behind here. So it's all native vegetation, and some of the benefits of that native vegetation, some of the benefits are that it helps to slow down the flow. So as we have all the rainwater that's collected on the surface and it's picked up or mobilized all those different pollutants that I mentioned, when it hits the vegetation above the surface, it slows that down, right? It slows that water down, so it allows some of the actual particles that are in that, some of the sediment or dirt that might be in that to settle out, so it doesn't get into the receiving water body. The plants themselves also take up any nutrients that may have been in that surface runoff from fertilization and things like that happen on the land surface. So the vegetation can then take those nutrients up, and it helps that vegetation grow and prevents those contaminants from getting into the water body. Another advantage of the native vegetation is that it helps to stabilize the banks of Lost Creek. So the native vegetation also helps to stabilize the banks. So we get less bank erosion of the banks of the stream with some vegetation on it. And that's because of the root mass underneath the ground. So if we think of like a turf grass or a Kentucky bluegrass that we often use for lawns, the rooting depth underneath the ground is just a few inches. When we look at native vegetation, so Indian grass, buffalo grass, the root mass below the ground gets to several feet deep and really has a dense root mass structure that it helps to hold that soil in place. So then by having that native vegetation helping to hold the soil in place, you're getting a lot less erosion of the bank material into the stream, then improving the water quality or not impacting the water quality as negatively with the influx of the soils that might be going in if you have erosion occurring. So in addition to helping with the surface runoff and helping to slow that flow down and let some of the particulates settle out, or absorbing uptaking some of the nutrients into the vegetation, the root mass also helps to stabilize the banks, then reducing the amount of extra soil and sediment that might get into the water body itself or into the stream water column itself. Okay, so one example of using the native vegetation is if you look on the bank of Lost Creek along here, prior to this mitigation project, that was completely lined with riprap. So riprap is kind of bigger angular stones that are meant to put in place to reduce erosion of the bank. So in the erosion sense, you're accomplishing the same goal, right? You're reducing the amount of erosion that's happening. But by putting in the vegetation, like I said, you're also reducing the amount of surface runoff and contaminants in that surface runoff that's actually reaching the stream. And then from my point of view, it looks a lot nicer because we have nice vegetation along the banks. It also provides a habitat for aquatic and terrestrial life. So that is the benefit of the added vegetation too, as opposed to just riprap lined.